Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2018 and the final part of this experiment where we're taking a look at what would happen if the top 6 leagues in Europe were given transfer embargoes until the year 2050. Now you can see on the screen in front of you, the Premier League completely changed, totally turned over from where we started this experiment. The only team left in there from the old Premier League is Manchester City, and they finished bottom with just 15 points. So it could not be more overturned than it is at the moment. Completely different teams. Bristol City currently cleaning up in the Premier League. The other leagues in Europe, not as much turnover there because they don't have the ability to spread their pay as well as the Premier League does, because obviously the Premier League has so much money and it's all position based and a lot more equal than in other leagues where it's done through sponsorship and other ways, which means that teams like Real Madrid and Barcelona will carry on enduring because the smaller teams can't sign, the big players are released. So that's why the Premier League has been as much kind of upheaval as it's had compared to some of the other teams in Europe. So what we're going to do today is go 15 years past the end of the transfer embargo because we're in the year 2050 now. Make sure you go and watch the previous episodes if you want to see what happened in the embargo in more detail. But it should be interesting, especially in the Premier League, which is going to be the focus really, because a lot of those big clubs like Man City, like United, still have a lot of income. And now that they're able to sign players, will surely rise back up the table. And it's whether teams like Bristol, Leeds, Preston, Hull and Wolves can hold on to the advantage that they've gained over the last 30 years and continue to dominate the Premier League. So that's going to be fascinating to watch. It'll also be interesting in the Champions League, where the English teams have completely cleaned up there for 20 years or so now. It'll be interesting if some of the other European giants like Real Madrid and Barcelona can come back and win some Champions League titles. So a lot of things to look forward to today. Do drop a like on the video if you enjoyed this experiment. This will be the final part, and make sure to subscribe. There'll be a new experiment now in a couple of days time, which should be a lot of fun for you guys, and also check out the Discord channel that I launched recently using the link in the description. But let's go forward now 15 years and see how things have turned out. Well, when we left off in Portugal, you could see that the only big team remaining was Sporting from the start of this experiment. Now, the transfer embargo has ended for these teams, so they should be climbing back up. Cova de Piedade had won the latest league. The next season, Sporting did manage to finish in third place. Fourth after that, no sign of Porto or Benfica, but finally Sporting come and take the top spot the following season. They do lose it though, again, the year after. Still the likes of Benfica not appearing in the top division, but Sporting starting to establish their dominance at the top because they do have all that money. Finally we see Benfica pop back into the top tier. Sporting still cleaning up at the top as Benfica fight relegation, and just continually picking up title after title. Porto nowhere to be seen, but Sporting totally dominating this league now as Benfica try and come back up the table. If we look at the second league, Braga have just won the title there, but no sign of Porto in the Spanish league system. They have clearly dropped too far down to recover, but I think if we look at the transfers in Portugal, it's going to be dominated by Sporting, although most of their players leaving there, bringing a lot of cash in, which is standard for Portugal to be fair. They seem to be losing most of their players every season, but they're spending a lot of money outside of that. But it's that classic Portuguese thing where they are letting their best players go after signing quite a few of them. I mean, for instance, this season they spent probably over 100 million, but they are always at the top of the transfer table. You can see the top 4 for leaving, but also the top 4 for coming in as well. So they are very much the big spenders again in the Portuguese league. Benfica nowhere near the top, and it means that Sporting will no doubt go on to dominate this league because they were the only one who actually managed to endure the embargo and actually won titles despite the embargo as well. So now, they've won the last 10 titles. They'll win this one as well, and they are surely just going to dominate Portuguese football for a long, long time to come. In 5th place in the league rankings, we have Serie A in Italy. And as you can see, they managed to hold out the big teams in Italy. We've got the likes of Empoli and Bari at the top there, Palermo and Padova as well, but AC Milan, Inter, Juventus, Fiorentina, Roma, all still there. And after the embargo ended, Inter Milan managed to dominate and take over the title. Juventus won it by away the following season, then Inter, Juve again, those two becoming the two big teams in Italy at this point. The other newly promoted teams certainly holding out quite well at the top there, holding off the likes of AC Milan and Roma, who've actually been relegated at this point. But Inter and Juve just sharing the title really between them, with Barry closest behind but not quite able to make a difference. And there you go, Barry dropping down to 5th. Roma have managed to come back up. But if we look at the transfers going back through the seasons to the start of the embargo, or the start of the end of the embargo, you can see instantly Inter and Juve spending an absolute fortune out the gate. Juve carrying on spending that money into the following season. I mean, it's just huge amounts of money being spent, and they've run straight back to the top of the spending league, which means that they are going to completely dominate in this league now. And it looks like it will probably be just those two teams who are going to share the title for a long time, as they have done right from the end of the embargo. So Empoli probably won their last title now, and it's going to be Inter and Juve pretty much forever, which is a little bit disappointing. It's so disappointing that in these European leagues, all the big teams have to do is wait out the embargo, and suddenly they start winning everything all over again. Now, in Spain, we had seen some of the newly promoted teams start to dominate the top of the football pyramid. Barcelona had actually been relegated in the final season here, and Real Madrid just missed out on the title. They'd won it quite a few times before that, so I imagine they'll bounce back straight away. You can see them in second place there, no sign of Barcelona, but they come back the following season and finish 8th as Real Madrid take the title on head-to-head, I believe, over Tenerife. And then second place for Real Madrid, Barcelona up to 6th. Then Real Madrid take the title. Barcelona struggling to break into the top 4 as Real Madrid dominate the title. Valladolid actually coming in to win it the following year before Real Madrid returned to the top by huge margins here. Gijon, though, managing to win it by a huge margin over Real Madrid, 15 points in that. Finally, we see Barcelona in the top 4. Bouncing around, but Barcelona not yet to come back and win a title. Atletico Madrid starting to return to the top. But when you look at the past winners, Real Madrid the dominant team, but some teams like Gijon and Valladolid managed to actually dislodge Real Madrid from the top spot there, which is quite interesting. And when we look at the transfers over time, you can see Real Madrid spending the money as you would expect. Barcelona up there as well, so I'm sure they'll return to the top eventually. But Real Madrid just had that upper hand from being title winners for a long time. You can see this season Barcelona spending a fortune, and they have done for quite some time. But Real Madrid actually not spending that much money. They did right at the start, look, huge transfers being spent when the embargo first ended. But Barcelona have been spending a lot of money too. So quite interesting the way that that's breaking down. It looks like Barcelona are spending more money than Real Madrid, but not quite having the same level of success. But it looks like they'll probably get there before too long. When we left off with the Bundesliga, Bayern and Leverkusen were the two big teams left. They were finishing outside of the top 4 though, as the newly promoted teams did well. Still got the likes of Dortmund in the top flight. The following season, Nuremberg managed to hold on to the title, Bayern creeping up into 4th place. But still, Nuremberg winning it, Leverkusen managing to win it. They've been very good for a long time. Bayern struggling here to break back into the top as Bochum win title after title, Leverkusen up there, and finally Bayern win the title in the 59 season, but they can't retain it. And it looks like the Bundesliga definitely a lot more competitive than any other team. I mean, Bayern have won the latest one, but that's an incredibly competitive league with a lot of different winners involved. Bayern always up there, Leverkusen always up there, but so many different winners here since the end of the embargo that this is the first league we've seen where there is a genuine change in the dominance of that league. Because obviously Bayern had dominated for so long. Dortmund are finishing down near the relegation zone. They haven't managed to recover 15 years after the embargo ended, and it's allowed the Bundesliga to be completely overhauled in terms of who the big dogs are. But Bayern may well just be able to flex their financial muscle as time progresses and return to the top of that league, but it's certainly a lot more competitive. Well, the French League is the second highest ranked league out of all the European ones, and you can see that PSG, even at the very end of the embargo, were winning the final title. Now I imagine they will continue to do so afterwards with the money they can spend. Monaco firing back up into second place as well, and that may well be the dynamic for the rest of this league, because I mean, look at this, PSG and Monaco just miles ahead of everybody else. PSG at the top there, Monaco missing out on the top spot, PSG winning 34 of 38 games, and then 37 wins and 1 defeat that season. They were 1 game away from a perfect season, and then they do get an unbeaten season. PSG just absolutely tearing apart this league with every single title, always getting over 100 points. And then in the most recent season, 2 games to go, they could well lose to FC Nantes, which is quite interesting, but I'm sure they will return to the top. They are so dominant. And that's after the league was mostly dominated by Monaco for a long time. But PSG, with the money that they've got, were always going to bounce back. And you can see at the end of the embargo here, not many French teams spending much money, which meant when PSG came back, they were putting out 200, 300 million a season, 133 million on one player here. And just trying to completely take control of this league, which they've done successfully, spending over 100, 200 million every single year, which has enabled them to totally dominate, as you would expect. So PSG completely tearing up Liga and nothing changes. So now we can move on to perhaps the most interesting league. The question here is, can the likes of Man City bounce back to the top of the league 1 year after this embargo's come down? And you can see Chelsea managed to get promoted but immediately relegated again as Bristol won the league. Bristol, the dominant team in English football at the moment. Liverpool and Spurs getting relegated straight away. Man City had a violation of their budget rules and got a points deduction, but they did survive, as did Chelsea. Real Madrid Man United finishing at the bottom, not Real Madrid. Bristol still dominating this league though. I mean, points deductions for Man City and Chelsea, who are probably spending so much on transfers to compete that they're getting points deductions. Man City would have gone down regardless of their deduction. Chelsea go down the following season. Man United did quite well that season before, and Arsenal sneaking up into 5th place in the league as Preston win the title. United again, points deduction, breaking budget rules. That's quite interesting that that's happening. Financial fair play clearly having an effect after so long in the Championship. And they're just not able to get back up to the top of the league. It's remained perfectly dominant for the likes of Bristol, Hull up there, and Bristol top with 1 game to go, Hull up there in 2nd, Arsenal finishing 5th. But no sign of United in the top, no Liverpool, no Spurs down in 16th. I mean, this is quite interesting. They just have not been able to bounce back. And if we look at the transfers, the season that we left off, you've got Bristol spending 150 million that final season, and then the biggest transfers were to PSG, but no United, no City in there. Chelsea barely spent any money. They did spend some here, Liverpool splashing out as well, but it remains Bristol who are the big spenders in the league, and they're not being dominated at the top here. You can see United spending some money, Bristol again, top spenders. They just keep on splashing the cash, and the former big dogs just cannot compete because they aren't getting that Premier League legacy money, they aren't getting the Champions League money, and it's meant that Bristol have been able to just completely control this league for a very long time now, winning an awful lot of titles. Bristol, after Wolves had this period of dominance, Bristol became the big team, possibly with a sugar daddy owner. And if we drop down into the Championship and have a look at the league table here at the moment, you can see Chelsea, United at the top there, Liverpool and Everton up there as well. But otherwise, like the rest of the league, looking pretty similar. You can see that these teams are too good for the Championship, but they just can't get a foothold in the Premier League. And if we have a look in League One, you can see there's still Premier League teams down here, like Leicester, former champions down here. Newcastle getting relegated from League One 15 years after the embargo ended. They've not been able to return to the Premier League. And in League Two, I imagine there are some teams down here as well, although I can't actually see them. And in the National League, there are quite a few Premier League teams that have dropped down here. The likes of Palace there, finished runner-up a while ago. Palace again down there the following season, not able to get back into the Football League. So interesting the way that has all worked out, and that the Premier League just hasn't reset itself. It's stayed exactly where it left off. And if we have a look at the Champions League, and take a look at how the English teams have been doing here, PSG obviously have managed to come back and start to dominate again. If we go to the quarterfinal and sort this by a tree system, and go back to where we left off, because the English teams were so dominant here. You can see Preston had won it an awful lot of times. We're the best team in English football history at this point, I think, in terms of European competitions. Leeds managed to win it the season afterwards. Palermo nearly making it to the final. Hull won it the year after that. 3 English teams in there with Bochum, who are doing well in the Bundesliga. And then finally we see the French teams return. Only 1 English team in the semi-finals, and Monaco managed to get through on penalties in the semis and beat PSG in the final on penalties, but PSG took it on penalties the following season. Then Bristol came back, 3 English teams in the semis that season. PSG, the only other team really to establish themselves as a Champions League force here against English teams, beating Preston a couple of seasons in a row before Bristol came back to win it. PSG again, then Inter got a win, Bristol City again, PSG, Preston, and then this season it's going to be PSG against either Hull or Bristol. But when you look at the past winners there, it's still the English teams, but you do have Monaco, Inter, and especially PSG popping up in the past winners there. But it's still the English teams who are dominating. And in the Europa League, a bit more variation here. You've still got lots of English teams, but you've got Real Madrid, Juventus, Barcelona, and Inter all winning this competition as well. So the big teams in Europe have been relegated to the Europa League, while the English teams continue to dominate in Europe. I mean, Bristol City winning quite a few Champions League titles now. They've won 4 since they became the financial force. Preston won so many in Europe, but Wolves were the dominant team before that. So we're seeing phases of English football changing between which team is the dominant team. Never completely dominating, but certainly doing very, very well. And finally, let's just have a quick look at the World Cup and its past winners, if we can actually click on it this time. And as you can see, Argentina, Spain, England actually did win the World Cup in 2054, so we've got that to look forward to after France dominated for so long. But it's interesting, England only won the World Cup after the embargo ended, which probably says a lot for all those people who say, that if we had more English players having opportunities, we'd win the World Cup. I don't think that's true at all, because it's just a case that our players aren't good enough. Now you can see here that not many English players are winning the World Player of the Year award. Certainly a lot of French players. This Polish guy here, I assume, Ibrahimovic, winning it for Bristol City. So English clubs are winning it, but not English players. You've got Jason Duffy, though, has managed to win it. But is he English or is he Irish? He is English. There we go. We had an English player win the World Player of the Year award. Mbappe was still winning it in 2028. But ultimately, not a great time for English football, this. And if we just have a look at the European Championship, then we can see past winners here. No England, lots of Germany wins, because Germany were winning this competition while France were winning the World Cup. So that's going to be it for this experiment. I hope you found that really interesting. I certainly did. Do drop a like on the video if you enjoyed this experiment, and make sure to subscribe for the next experiment. You can also let me know if you've got ideas for them down in the comments section below, and make sure to check out the Discord channel as I said before. You can also find links to my Twitter and Patreon. But until next time, see ya.